Welcome back, fire starters, to another episode. I have Jaclyn Whitt here, and I'm so excited for her to step in this position today as a fire starter guest and share her story. We've already kind of been chatting and had some good dialogue going back and forth. A little bit about her. She is a performer by nature. She's always ready to use her creative gifts to inspire people toward the kingdom of God. Her identity is firmly grounded in her faith and calling as a wife, mother, stepmother, and grandmother. Jaclyn is an award-winning screenwriter, the education coordinator of Faith and Family Screenwriting Academy, and the co-host of the Faith and Family Filmmakers podcast. Hello, fellow podcaster. And she's also the author of a brand new released book, just released in July, titled In the Beginning, Middle, and End. And it is about something that's near and dear to my heart, about how God is really the author of our lives. And so I would love to just dive in with you today and get a chance, take the opportunity to share your story with our listeners. So where did this start? When was that moment? And there were probably many where God asked you, hey, Jaclyn, it's me. It's time to go this direction. I need you to take a step out of the boat.
Well, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I really appreciate it. I love the fact that your podcast is getting to know people. It's fantastic. And yeah, so talking about God asking me to step out of the boat, I actually had a very specific moment where God was asking me to do something. I had to go and pitch a presentation to a boardroom full of people, which was part of actually pursuing work for me at the time. I was a single parent and I needed work. And one of the things that I do well, I guess, is talk in front of people. And so I was going to pitch my presentation and I just had so many nerves because I was pitching this new idea. And new ideas are kind of a hit and miss. Some people see your vision and some people just don't. And so I was very nervous. And so, I was kind of praying, trying to work through my nerves. And then I just thought, well, you know what? I'm just going to do it, sink or swim kind of thing. Right. And then I felt the Holy Spirit say to me, are those your only options? And I thought, what? What do you mean? What other option is there? And then I remembered Peter stepping out of the boat, and it was like God was calling me to not just go into this with a sink or swim type of attitude, but to keep my eyes on him and to know that he was actually calling me into this, even though it felt stormy and it felt like it wasn't safe, but at the same time, like he was with me. So I could actually do something miraculous if I was with him.
I absolutely love that. And what an amazing distinction. That's honestly, I don't think it's ever been made on this podcast of, so those two options, sink or swim, is all dependent upon you
Exactly.
and your actions and what you can or can't do. But to rely on the Lord, which is exactly in that moment with Peter, right? He is sustained by his faith, right? When he's locked eyes on Jesus and trusting Jesus. The moment he takes his eyes off Jesus and notice the waves, he immediately begins to become, I would assume, hyper aware that I'm human. I can't do this.
Yeah.
I need to swim. What's happening?
Yeah.
And so that is so incredible. And what a great truth to live out. So from that moment, did they like the new idea? I have to know.
Yes, they did.
They did. I love it. Because the Lord was like, I've called you to it, friend. I'm doing it. You're being obedient. You're talking for me, which is what I need you to do, but I'm going to be working here on their hearts. So take me through how you've gotten into screenwriting and all of the things that you've already done, especially hearing, are you still a single mom? Are you remarried? Bring it all to light.
Yeah, I'm remarried now. We've been married for almost 11 years. So
Oh, wow.
I was a single parent for about 6 or 7 years, and so it was definitely a season. And during that season, God was extremely present in my life, and even people around me could see it. So I've got tons of testimonies from that time, and that happened to be during that time. And I worked very closely with the Lord and he was very present. So I can look back at that time, even though there was a lot of struggle. I can see how close God was involved in everything. But let me back up to when I started writing, the very first script that I started writing was just like for a stage. It was just a script. I was 11 and I didn't finish it. It was just something a friend of mine and I kind of started working on, but I ended up keeping the notebook with me that had the script in it. And so every now and then I would find it and I'd be like, oh, hey, this was kind of fun. And I'd write a bit more, or then I started writing other ones. But it was one of those things that I just did for fun for me. Like most people didn't even know that I was writing scripts. But I was writing for stage because that's what I had, I guess a frame of reference for. I loved acting and, I had school, I had church. And so, sometimes I'd write something to be performed on a stage. But I was mostly into music. So I kind of thought like my life was going in that direction. So I never even considered writing scripts as something that I would pursue as a career. And actually, I struggled with reading, and so I didn't even think writing would be something I would pursue as a career. So in my early 20s, though, when my oldest was a baby and I was pregnant with my next, and I did not have I couldn't pursue music. I mean, music is one of those things that it demands you to actually go out and perform. And like, there's a lot of marketing. And the lifestyle of a musician was something I realized I could not pursue. Uh, but I needed a creative outlet. I am definitely the type of person, if I do not have a creative outlet, I get so depressed. So I had this idea that I wanted to write, and I sat down to write the script. And I literally, my hands were hovering over the keyboard about to start. And I realized I cannot write this as a play. It doesn't work as a play because this idea that I had was constantly going between these different locations and these different people for these different storylines. And I thought, I guess this has to be a movie. And it didn't occur to me that that might be something difficult to learn. And so I just decided I'm going to look it up and figure out how to write a movie. So the internet was already a thing, and thankfully. And so,
Yes.
so I was able to start doing some research. And so I taught myself how to write a screenplay. And then that just became a thing that I continued to do just for me. Again, it was just for me. It was kind of like, it was therapeutic, to be honest. Sometimes you go through things in life that they don't turn out the way that you wanted. And
Mm-hmm.
so when you can go back and you're not reliving it in reality, but you can kind of rewrite it maybe in a way that allows you to release it so that it doesn't just hang over you. And so that's kind of what I would do is I would sort through and process these situations or conversations in my life. And that's, it just really helped me just personally and emotionally. And then when I got married again, my husband read one of my scripts and he was like, you actually have to make this. Like, this is not something that you can just like this needs to get made. So then I had to think about it because when something is a hobby, you just
Mm.
do it for the joy of it, right?
Yes.
Like you don't really have to focus too much on discipline. Yes, it's nice to learn new skills, but really at the end of the day, if it's for you, it's for you.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're going to pursue something as a career, even if God's calling you to it, right? There's going to be that discipline that you have to figure out how to do it well and pursue it with
Yes.
excellence and not just for the joy. I mean, the joy should still be there, but you have to pursue beyond that. So I decided, okay, yeah, I'm going to go for it. So first thing I did was go find a mentor that would be able to help me to learn the things that I didn't teach myself. Because when you're self-taught, some things you excel at and then you just completely miss other details. That was
Yes.
me.
I think that's everybody.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think so. Yeah. So yeah, I guess from there, I just continued studying with him and improving my craft until my youngest son turned 18. And I realized something when he was about 16, and I was kind of trying to put my work out there to see, like, can I get any jobs writing or whatever? And it just wasn't working. It was like all the doors were closed. And I thought, what is going on? So then I was praying, and then God reminded me of something I had said when I was a teenager. And when I was in high school, I remember thinking about, like, what you want to be when you grow up and whatever. And I knew I wanted to be a mother. That was really important to me, always was. And I knew I wanted to pursue a career in something creative. But I also knew I did not want to do them at the same time. And so
Okay.
when God reminded me of that, then I realized, oh, he is helping me to actually fulfill my own commitment to myself. because I'm such an all-in person, right? And if I had to do both at the same time, like it something would have fallen apart. And I can't imagine, like with what I do right now, there's no way I could do it if I was still raising children at home.
Really?
No way. Not for me anyway, not the way I do it. I'm
That
so all in.
that is such a great, first of all, your awareness. I love your awareness, which is so important because you can't change anything, can't be grateful if you're not aware.
Mm.
And that's one of
Mhm.
the things that's important to me. I talk about becoming a fire starter. And one of the things, the first step, I mean, you cannot be a fire starter if you're not open and coachable yourself. I love that you found a mentor. I believe that anytime you're just setting out to do essentially anything in
Mhm.
life, it's important to find somebody who's gone before you, who can guide you, who can help you. They don't have to be that much ahead, but and like-minded and pursuing it, right?
Yeah.
So I love that you were aware of that as well. So since, are you an empty nester now?
Yes, my husband and I actually decided we wanted to dive into this full time. Like, I wanted to go into writing full time, and he was painting, which is hard on his body, and he was ready for a change. So he thought, I want to pursue like building an online business, which is what we have done together. And so we actually sold everything and left Canada, which is where we're from, and moved to Mexico so that we would have, like less bills to pay, and just so we could focus on building value in the business. Because when you start a business, you need to go into it knowing that you're probably not going to make a lot of money for the first year or two. And
Right.
so you set yourself up for success by not being stuck trying to figure out how do I make money all the time, right? Just building the value, and that's what we focused on. Yeah.
That is incredible. And this is, I mean, this is exactly what I'm talking about, fire starters. Ordinary woman doing extraordinary things
Hmm.
because you're following his call on your life. Selling, okay, first of all, I'm a language person. My master's is in linguistics. So do you speak French and do you speak Spanish as well?
I speak Spanish. As far as French goes, it's one of those things where we have a lot of familiarity with it, but
Hmm.
I'm from an area that we don't speak it. So I can understand some things. I can probably read it better than I can, have a conversation, because we have all of our labels for everything also in French. But
Okay.
yeah, yeah. But it's not something like I can't just sit down and have a conversation in French. But
Right.
Spanish, yes.
Okay. I love that. I absolutely love that. So now you're in Mexico, you've started your online business and you're writing full time. How do you manage this call on your life, God's call on your life, and just the day to day? Like, you've got kids, you said you're a grandmother now, so
Hmm.
grandchildren. How do you balance that, or can you?
Um, well, okay, I think it's important to understand that balance is not necessarily a day to day, hour to hour kind of balance. I think balance is one of those things where you need to be aware of seasons in your life.
Mm,
And so, if you take a more aerial view and maybe look over a decade or so, and within a year or within a decade, have I been able to pursue all of the things that are priority to me?
mhm.
And does that actually make sense according to what my priorities truly are? And that's partly why we waited until my kids were grown in order to really pursue this. And so before we left for Mexico, my older son had moved out. So my husband's children, they were already adults when we got married,
Okay.
and so they were already on their own. So it was just my two that were at home. And so my older son had moved out and started to live on his own. And so he was kind of settled. And my younger son came with us for the first 6 months.
Okay.
And then, because we wanted to give him the option, do you want to stay with us in Mexico or do you want to go back to Canada? So it was a good opportunity for him to have an adventure. And he chose to go back to Canada. And he had a place. He lives at my sister's house, rents a room there. So he's, learning how to be an adult. So it's a pretty good transitional opportunity for him to go from, living with his parents to living on his own. He's kind of halfway between. But that's kind of, I guess, how to balance all of that out was my kids knew for years leading up to it that that was basically the plan.
Hmm.
They knew that they were learning how to be adults, that they weren't just, in my house to finish school, that they were in my house while they were growing up and learning how to eventually become independent. So that was always in their mind, and something worth pursuing. I think I think that's one of the things that might be missing sometimes. Because I also worked as an education assistant when I was raising my kids. I worked with homeschoolers who had learning disabilities, and I would help them to learn. But one of the things that I would also help them with is working with the families for them to understand that it's not just about education. When you have a child that has a disability, you still have to have long-term goals that go beyond finishing school. And what are you going to do after you graduate, and thinking more long term that way. And so that was, I guess, something that I then applied to my own children. Was like, okay, so it's not just about graduating high school. Like, there's this whole other life that's going to happen after that, so let's build you toward that, and school will happen in the process.
That is really beautiful. I'm so glad you talked about that. I had mentioned earlier when we were chatting that I help host another podcast called Moms Wake Up. And we talk about that a little bit, how sometimes parents, usually mothers, I'll speak for mothers because I am one and I talk to mostly mothers. We live through our children and we want to protect them from anything that's difficult. I always say, if my children are going to fall, I'd rather them fall in my household, in my shelter, so that I can coach them through that. But there is this responsibility. They're not ours, they're the Lord's. And
Mm-hmm.
we've been given a job to build that foundation of Christ, right?
Yes,
But also to
absolutely.
lift them off to go be humans who follow God's path. And what I love the most, you didn't talk about it because you don't need to, you're doing it, is your kids got to see you faithfully obey the Lord's call on your life and take a path less chosen. I'm sure how many of their childhood friends, parents have up and moved, started an online, or it doesn't even have to be your
Mm-hmm.
own online thing or go to a different country, but
Yeah.
just obediently following. I've heard it said that there's a form of neglect when your kids don't see you chasing your dreams,
Mm.
because you can tell them all day long, you can do anything and what do you
Yeah.
want to do? But if they don't see you doing it,
Yeah.
they know not to believe it. And your children got to see you do
Oh,
that.
yeah.
It's
Oh, yeah,
beautiful.
they heard all my stories, all the scripts I was working on. I was like, "I have this idea about this character that goes here and does this thing." So, yeah, they heard all my stories. We'd talk about them at the dinner table, and they knew that I was studying. Oh, and they heard my frustrations. There were times where I would go to see my mentor, and he would tell me, "Nope, this is still not working." And I'd go home feeling so frustrated and wondering, like, am I ever going to figure this out? Am I ever going to be any good at it? And so they saw me work through that. And because I would tell them, like, look, I know I'm frustrated right now, but that's just part of pushing through and learning and growing. Like, I know I will get it. I just have to keep trying. And then I did. And now I know that that is part of the process. There's always this point in writing a script where I get to the point where I feel like I don't know what's missing. And I know there's something, but I can't see it because I'm too close to it. And this is why it's really good to have other people that you trust that can look at your work and tell you what's missing, where you know that they're going to be able to help you to finish making it what it needs to be. I love that.
Absolutely. I love that. I mean, we're built for community is what I've learned.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think you can grow in a vacuum,
No.
in isolation. And so we're set up for this. I mean, you see it with Moses when he goes out to the desert, he meets back up with his father-in-law. And his father-in-law essentially says, you need to like set up a government here. These people can't
Yeah.
keep coming to you, right? That's great mentorship. And it poured into Moses. It was wisdom. And so we
Mm-hmm.
need that. We're made for that. It allows them to use their gifts and allows us to say, I'm not everything. I need help. And on top of that, there was another thought that I had as I was listening to you, and I was like, this is so, so beautiful. Your kids getting to see the frustrations and the endurance that it creates. I love that they got to see you pushing through and that it's not like this straight up, it's
Yeah.
this. And
Exactly.
it sanctifies you. I think if you're ever, I don't know, I was a teacher for 21 years in the classroom. And every day is a challenge, right? Because you're working with humans.
Mm-hmm.
But essentially, there kind of came a point where, for the most part, I wasn't necessarily growing. I might have been using new skills or learning a new set of curriculum, but me, my character and all of that, I had reached this like I'm sitting pretty. I can
Mm,
kind of do this in my sleep,
hmm.
which gives me some brain span for other areas of my life, which can be good. But I I do believe that God loves us so much that when He does call us to something, it is going to be something that I don't know that we'll ever in the day going, well, I've mastered that now.
Right.
I've reached the highest
Yeah,
pinnacle of,
exactly. Yeah.
So I love that it pushes you to that endurance and frustrates you so that you can realize I have what it takes to push and to
Hmm.
grow and to learn. And your kids
Yeah.
got to see that.
Yeah, yeah, and that was kind of something I actually purposely let them see because I wanted to example that, because, I mean, anything that really matters in life, you're gonna have to work hard for, and
Yes.
that's what it is.
So they're your biggest supporters, I meant. Did you ever meet, like, was there anybody in your life going, Jaclyn, what are you doing? Like, you're full time, you're moving to Mexico. Are you sure that's a smart idea? I mean, with the way the world is right now, did you have any of that?
Um, some, but not a whole lot, and I think part of it is because, um although my life has been kinda, like, up and down and all over the place, like, I've always been a very creative person, and I think that anybody that's really gotten to know me could tell very quickly, like, okay, she's gonna do things that aren't normal. That's just me.
I love it. I love that. What have been the biggest challenges as you've journeyed on this path? Because I know you believe you're doing the Lord's
Oh,
work.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say one of the biggest challenges is the language. Like I do speak Spanish pretty well. My husband didn't speak a word of Spanish when we moved there, and so we've had to get used to that because we still have our daily life, even though it does allow us to pursue our career and our business the way that we wanted to. We still have to interact with people. When we go out to whether it be grocery shopping or just community, and we have a church that we attend, and so we do have to speak another language. And I would say after about 3 months, my brain just was exhausted because it wasn't just like every now and then having a conversation in Spanish. It was like every time I left the house, I was speaking Spanish, and it was exhausting. I think that's one of the things that a lot of people maybe don't think about if they're thinking about moving to another country. It's like, well, you have to actually be prepared to speak it constantly. Um, but I guess other than that, being apart from my kids, that was definitely an adjustment. I do think that I was prepared for it, and I don't think I went through the empty nesters kind of uh, issues that I think a lot of my friends have been going through. And I
Yeah.
think that part of that is because we already had the plan set up. Like everything was working toward this particular plan, which is playing out right now. And so, knowing that my kids were in a good, healthy place in Canada, I knew that like I have family that lives near them, and so if there was anything to happen, like they wouldn't be alone. And so they're finding their way as adults, and we talk quite often. So that kind of manages that part of it. But but yeah, I think it's a lot of work, but it's work that I love, and sometimes it's overwhelming because there's a lot of it. But honestly, it's like even on the hard days, if I stop and think about it, I know I'm exactly where God wants me to be in that
Mhm.
moment, and so where else would I rather be?
Right. That's exactly right. And that leads me to the next question I had floating in the back of my mind. From what you've shared, you're creative. You've loved writing since a young age. So obviously God has designed you to have
Mhm.
this desire in your heart, right? What do you think as you move forward? I know your desire is pulling you, but what work do you hear the Lord calling you to accomplish for his kingdom? What are you hoping are the end results of the work you do while you're here?
Yeah. I have discovered that family really, really means a lot to God, like more than I think we can even fathom.
Mhm.
Like, so marriage, parents and children, like all of those dynamics that God created and so whenever I do something, whether it be, with music or screenplays or even like my book, all of it, it is, it's speaking to family, in different kind of facets. And so my movies sometimes are based on a true story, and sometimes they're based on just like fictional ideas that I come up with. But there is very much the heart of God toward the his plan for family. All of that is just weaved into everything. And sometimes even family is like mentorship. Like I have this one story where it's a young man who was in the foster system. Like he had no family, and then when he grew up, he ends up being mentored by this older man. Even in that situation, it's like they have this father-son relationship, even though it was more of a chosen relationship rather than, a biological one. But, these kinds of things, these are things that are on God's heart, and especially like step parenting. I mean, look at Joseph. Joseph was Jesus' stepdad, right? And he stepped in and he protected Jesus while he was young. And I'm sure he taught him some amazing things, and they had a beautiful relationship. But this is all designed by God, and I do feel like there's an attack on family, and
Yes.
so I very much like um to press into that, and I feel that is where I am called, and storytelling is basically how I pursue that.
I love that. So let's dive into your book before
Sure.
this closes out. What how did you know that was the book you were meant to write? What are you hoping it communicates to your readers?
Yeah, I actually never thought I would write a book. I really fought it, like, because I love script writing. Like I said, I struggled with reading. And so in a book, there are words all over that page. It is it is so full of words. But in a script, if you look at a screenplay, like there's a lot of white on the page. There's not nearly as many words. And you are limited on how many pages you can write for a movie anyways, because the way that it's formatted, one page equals about 1 minute of screen time. So for a 2-hour movie, it can't be longer than 120 pages.
Oh,
So yeah, so I really liked working within that limitation. It didn't feel like it was overwhelming for me. Whereas a book, it's like that thing can go on forever.
yeah, I can.
Yeah. so so I really fought it for a long time. And then moving into this career, I was told by a lot of people, like, you really need to have a book. And I didn't know where I would start with it. But then I started to realize that, like, I am the type of person, I learn from whatever situation I'm in life. And I transfer whatever I learn to other areas of my life. And I
Mhm.
realized that learning how to be a screenwriter taught me a lot of things about life and about character growth and about God. And so that's what it's actually called, in the beginning, middle, and end: a screenwriter's observations of life, character, and God. So it's kind of like it's a look into my own life, because I use my own life as examples sometimes. But then I also talk about, as an author, this is how I approach this situation. So, how much more would God approach the situation this way, or even in a deeper way or something? So, for example, just real quick, um, I, as a writer, am outside of the story,
Mhm.
right? The story is in me and I write the story, but I cannot sit down and have a conversation with my character, because they are in a different world. They're in me, but they're in a different world. I can't pull them out of this script and sit them in front of me so I can tell them, "Hey, you're going to go through a rough time, but don't worry, I got you." I can't tell them that.
Right.
That's just not how it works. They are inside the story. Now, they're going to go through a journey where they're going to learn something very meaningful. And there's going to be obstacles, which is usually I use an obstacle to get their attention and
Yes.
get them to do things differently. So even thinking about that one, like, oh, if there's an obstacle in my life, I can't just blame the devil. This might
Right.
actually be God trying to get my attention.
Yes.
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 But the thing is, like, when we have enemies in our life, and especially if we want to think like, the enemy of our soul or whatever, um, he's still only a character, right?
Mm.
He's not actually writing the story. And so when I'm writing the villains in my story, the villain might be stronger than my hero, but he's not stronger than me.
Oof. That's so good.
Right? He can only
So
do what I
good.
let him do. So, yeah, that's just one little thing. There's like 15 chapters where each one gets into something that is like mind-blowing like that. So, yeah, if you're trying to understand God from a new angle, I would recommend this book.
That is so excellent. Um, you hear in this day and age where people are branding and find your niche and all of that, which I think are really worldly ways of saying, know who you are and who God's called you to be and the work He's called you to, which
Right.
is what you've done. You've
Mhm.
spoken about what you know and communicated it in a way that is how you communicate. And
Mhm.
so I'm sure it comes through very, very strongly, clearly, authentically. And I'm excited for you. The book
Thank
released
you.
just last month. We're in August now. And I bet, how does it feel to have done? I mean, you've obviously accomplished a lot. I mean, you're
Mhm.
award winning, right? But does it feel different doing something that you're like, I never thought I would do this versus, yes, I've been writing,
Right.
scripts for a
Yeah.
long time. Does it feel different?
Yeah, it actually opened up a whole other world for me because it's almost like now that I've done that, like I actually learned a lot while being a single parent. And I'm feeling like it's on my heart now that I want to write a book specifically for single parents and for people that are supporting single parents because I remember when I was a single parent, I had a friend who it's like her job was to go to support people like families in need, and she just kept watching me and saying like, how are you managing? Like, I mean, I felt like a chicken with my head cut off, but my home was actually very stable, and she was really wondering like how are you managed? Like, how are you so mature with this? And but it's because I understood that I was parenting with God, and
Oh,
so there are things that I learned and ways that I was able to really lean on him and understand that's not for me, that's his job. you know? So
that's good.
yeah, I've already started writing ideas. And so now all of a sudden I never thought I'd write a book and now I've got a second one on the way. Like I just it's opened up a whole world for me. So now books are part of what I do.
And I'm not surprised. All the fire starters and you were such a fire starter, Jaclyn. You were so flammable. I even heard you say it. I mean, just talking about you learning a skill, being open to it, and then transferring it. That's flammability right there. And you know what? When you live your life like this, the people who have proximity to you, they get to see this and they get the opportunity to choose to be flammable as well and to ignite and to dive into themselves and say, what is the Lord calling me to do? She said she'd never write a book and now she's contemplating a second one.
yeah.
You know, maybe God does know me better than I know myself, and there's more
Uh-huh.
to me, and I can go for it because, like we said in the beginning, like you said, He's got you out on that water as long as we keep our eyes on Him.
Mhm.
That's so good. If you could go back to your earlier self before you started on this journey, or even to somebody who is starting this journey of stepping out of the boat, what wisdom would you share with them?
I would leave timing in God's hands and not be stressed about, I need to hurry up, I'm running out of time. Because the thing is, I do believe that God can actually accelerate time. So even though I waited until my kids were grown to really dive into my career, that was only like 2 years ago, not even. And everything has just been so fast since then. My husband and I launched the business that we have and it's taken off. I ended up writing a book. I've got like movies that are in pre-production, which means it's getting organized to get made. Like there's so much going on and all of that has happened just in the past 2 years. And so it's almost as if I had started my career 10 or 15 years ago, I would probably be somewhere around where I'm at now because I would have had to do it in between all the other stuff. And it would have probably been I would have had to deal with a lot of friction and trying to force doors open. But because I did it this way, and he was like, "Okay, time is now." Because I swear, my son turned 18, and like a week later, I had doors flying open, and everything just moving forward. So it was clearly his timing, and he honored my desire to honor the calling that I had in life, which being a mother is definitely one of my callings. And then now being an author and pursuing the creativity that he's given me. And so with that, like, he has equipped me in the right time and season. And so it doesn't matter if you have to focus on one thing and wait for the next. God can accelerate it when that timing is right.
That is wisdom. And that's a good word. That's a good word for me, actually. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I am so grateful that you took time to share your story here today. I know it's igniting my listeners. I can imagine there is a mama at home right now with a huge dream in her heart thinking, how am I going to get started? And you just gave her permission to trust the Lord, that he gave her that desire for a purpose, and there's work to do now, but it will not be work that would cause friction, like you said. I love that. Thank you so much for today. I need everybody, as you're listening, I'm going to put it in the show notes, where they can find you. What link would you want them to go to first to get connected with you and your work?
If you go to jaclynwhitt.com, so my name is spelled without a K. It's just JACLYNWHITT. So if you go to jaclynwhitt.com, you can actually download a free chapter of my book. And it's a chapter on miracles, which is, I think it's one, especially if you're struggling with any kind of anxiety or, trusting God, like that. That's definitely the chapter that digs into you can trust God. And so, you can get that. And then from there, we can get connected, because I'll send you an email, which will include like a link to my podcast and Facebook and all of that stuff.
And I will put all of that in the show notes because I know they're going to want to get connected to you and get your book as well. Thank you again for today. You are truly a fire starter.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.